I feel like watching the epic history video on the rise of China. We've watched the 4 part before that. Starting from like the century of humiliation. In the last part we ended with Mao dying, and this guy, which I forget the name, I think it's Deng Xiaoping, taking over China basically, getting rid of the Gang of Four, including Mao's wife, and trying to, steer things in a less extreme direction for the country. So yeah, let's see the continuation of Epic History, The Rise of China series. I think it's episode 5, yeah. Hello, Novik. Setting things right, Deng Xiaoping's guiding philosophy, 1977. Still taking requests, share on Discord if you want, yeah, maybe. Maybe.
1978, and China has a new leader, the 74-year-old Deng Xiaoping. Deng's record as a reformer, as well as his frank and avuncular manner, is a stark contrast to the memory of Mao Zedong. Deng is convinced that only the Chinese Communist Party can lead China to prosperity. But he also believes major reforms are necessary to do it. His views are echoed by prominent supporters Hu Yaobang and Zhao Ziyang, who Deng describes as his left and right hands. Together they promote the 4 modernizations in agriculture, industry, national defense, and science and technology. But there is also a growing number who question China's repressive system. Encouraged by Deng's talk of ideological liberation, activists stick up political posters along Beijing's Xidan Street. It becomes known as the Democracy Wall.
Interesting that Seven is saying that they wouldn't destroy it.
Many of the posters criticize Mao and the Gang of Four. Deng Xiaoping tolerates this criticism of his predecessors, even as so-called big character posters spread across Beijing and other major cities. People have grievances and they should be allowed to express them, Deng tells an American journalist.
What a progressive guy, yeah.
Most posters are anonymous. But in December 1978, Wei Jingsheng, an electrician and former Red Guard, posts an essay entitled "The Fifth Modernization." Signing it with his real name and address, he argues that democracy is essential for the welfare of the Chinese people. Democracy, freedom, and happiness for all are our sole objectives in carrying out modernization, he writes. Now, the limits to the new spirit of openness are revealed.
So it's fine if you do it anonymous, but if you give your name, that's too far.
Wei Jingsheng and 30 other activists are arrested and given long jail sentences.
To uphold socialism, we must eliminate poverty. Poverty is not socialism. Deng Xiaoping, 84. Hello, Ray.
In March 1979, Deng Xiaoping introduces 4 basic principles. 1. Uphold the socialist road. 2. Uphold the dictatorship of the proletariat. 3. Uphold the leadership of the Communist Party. 4. Uphold Marxism, Leninism, Mao Zedong thought. Any misapprehension that Deng's reforms will include an end to one-party rule are firmly laid to rest.
What a surprise.
Nevertheless, his planned economic reforms are ambitious and far-reaching. Deng signals his desire to strengthen international relations and expand trade during a landmark visit to the United States. It's the first by a Chinese leader since 1943.
Was it Chiang Kai-shek before that?
In Texas, his evident enjoyment of American traditions helps win over the crowds and underscores his pragmatic approach to China's foreign relations.
Sorry, I don't do a trailer reaction on this stream.
Deng's goal is to lift millions of ordinary Chinese out of poverty and into the middle class. The means will be a new economic system, socialism with Chinese characteristics. For the first time, elements of market capitalism will be introduced into what has been a rigidly state-controlled communist model. Decisions will be decentralized, industries opened to private enterprise, and price controls loosened. However, the changes will be introduced cautiously, and all aspects of the economy will remain under close government supervision. Special economic zones will be the blazing beacons of China's new economic era.
Not on the stream, the song reaction are for like, you can suggest them if you want, but I do them in videos.
Inspired by the post-war booms in Singapore, Hong Kong, South Korea and Japan, the first SEZs are all on the coast to facilitate foreign investment. They include Shenzhen, just 15 miles from Hong Kong, and Xiamen, opposite Taiwan. Many more will follow in the 1980s. The SEZs offer foreign investors access to China's plentiful cheap labor and raw materials, with less regulation and lower taxes. They are touted as gateways to China, ports through which a booming trade in imports and exports can be established. The SEZs are a massive success, attracting huge amounts of foreign investment, new factories and jobs. In the countryside, Mao's mass collectivization programs are rolled back.
Which is what I was gonna say, like this makes you think, if Mao didn't die yet, and he had been around for like another 10-20 years, and they had to keep following like his ways, which had been already so disastrous, where would that have ended up? Because I don't think Mao would have gone this direction, opening so much to other countries and all that. It is interesting as a what if.
Rural households are allocated their own land, with more freedom in how they choose to farm it. Over the next 6 years, 97% of peasant households move from collective to individual land ownership. Agricultural output increases by more than 60%. Hunger and famine, which have haunted Chinese peasants for millennia, become a thing of the past. Thousands of students and officials who had been exiled to rural areas during the Cultural Revolution are allowed to return to the cities and resume their functions. Entrance exams to universities, suspended during the Cultural Revolution, are reintroduced in 1977. And academic life resumes in universities across the country.
But I can imagine like anyone was gone through the Cultural Revolution and now is coming back, to get back the old job, must still be very suspicious, right? Because it happened once. Why wouldn't you think that, the government is gonna make something like this happen again? You would be kind of scared.
Abroad, China continues to assert its influence as a major regional power. To the south, in Indochina, it has supported two communist insurgencies in Vietnam and Cambodia. After long struggles, both have secured control in their respective countries.
Absolutely, well, kind of related, but a couple of days ago, I discovered a game called Vietnam War. It's on Steam, it's made by one guy, and it has an absolutely insane scope, even though it's not good. It's basically like a Vietnam War game that has like the whole map of Vietnam, and you can play between the American and the different, like, the Viet Cong, the Chinese help, stuff like that. And it's a pretty bad looking game and bad playing game, but the scale of it is pretty amazing. So, you play as one soldier, and you have to like liberate little camps. You have to try to like take over zones, and again, it's like the map is not very detailed, but it's massive. It's an FPS, and it's one of those games that I've played that, it feels terrible to play, and yet you play a few hours of it because you see the idea, and it is very, very interesting. It's kind of like a massive version of Easy Red 2, for anyone who knows that one. The topic, this is about China after the death of Mao Zedong, basically what happens to them and how they grow. But yeah, kind of random, but that game was interesting, and it's made by one person.
But by the late 1970s, China's relations with communist Vietnam are deteriorating fast. After the Soviet-China split, Vietnam sides with its other backer, the Soviet Union. In 1978, Vietnam invades Khmer Rouge-controlled Cambodia, led by Pol Pot, threatening to overthrow China's other regional ally. Outraged, China launches a limited invasion of Vietnam the following year. But it is a costly affair. Experienced Vietnamese forces inflict an estimated 20,000 casualties on the People's Liberation Army. Chinese military deficiencies are exposed, leading to a thorough overhaul and modernization.
At the same time, America had the same issue, right? Like crazy resource, crazy training, crazy weapons, and yet massive struggle in Vietnam, so China isn't alone. It was really like a different type of conflict
of its armed forces. Attacking Vietnam, a Soviet ally, does no harm to China's relations with the West, however, which continue to improve. Deng Xiaoping hosts state visits by the Prime Ministers of Great Britain and Japan, the President of France, and Queen Elizabeth II. Deng is Time magazine's Man of the Year. Twice. Deng even softens official language toward the old enemy, nationalist-controlled Taiwan. Communist China's stated strategy towards Taiwan becomes one of peaceful reunification rather than liberation. But Deng's offer to incorporate Taiwan into the People's Republic of China under a one country, two systems formula is rejected by Taiwan's president, Jiang Jingkuo, son of Chiang Kai-shek. China's new confidence abroad is seen in its promotion of pinyin, the new phonetic system for spelling Mandarin Chinese using the Latin alphabet. The international media finally learns to call Peking Beijing.
I mean, I guess it's one of the best things that they've done, simplified Chinese. Like, it's probably like one of the best advancements for, for the country, yeah, the simplified version.
At home, however, the Communist Party's control over society remains as firm as ever. Since 1949, China's population has been growing at an unprecedented rate. This was the result of giant strides in public health, while Mao and the government had encouraged and rewarded large families. In just 30 years, China's population has nearly doubled, from 550 million to around 1 billion.
I mean, it makes sense, right? I mean, in the last 100 years, they lost how many dozens of millions between the wars, the civil war, the natural disaster, the mass famine by the government policies. Yeah, it just makes sense. Once things stabilize and there's not all that going on, it's much easier for the population to grow. Yeah. When is the one-child policy starting? Is it around there or is it like a later thing? I know I've heard about that, but I don't know when it starts.
It's a rate that many experts believe is unsustainable and harmful to prosperity. And so, in 1980, China introduces a one-child policy. For most families, a second child will now lead to heavy fines and other penalties.
It's one of the most insane things that I've heard, like any country do. Telling you only have one kid. If you have twins, I'm fining you. It's kind of insane. Actually, I do wonder, like, I'm joking, but I do wonder, like, if you have twins, do you get a fine?
In some cases, there are even forced abortions and sterilization. The consequence will be a generation of single-child families with a strong gender imbalance in favor of males.
Like, it's another thing where, like, again, it's like they didn't really learn the lesson of all those kind of massive decisions made by Mao before, right? That all led to some kind of disaster. And I don't know if this one is called a disaster, right? You could say that this one avoided a disaster because if the population kept growing at the rate, there might have been like even worse problem, but I don't know. It definitely feels like one of those kind of not very well thought out ideas, obviously. And I'm not sure what the full repercussion have been, but it is just an insane thing to even do.
Strict family planning laws are just one way that the Communist Party has transformed the roles and experience of women living in China. Mao declared that women hold half the sky, and in the 1950s he'd introduced laws to improve women's rights in marriage, divorce and property. By the late 70s, it is estimated that up to 90% of women based in urban areas are in work. In 1980, China is among the first to ratify the UN Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination against Women. But ambitions and declarations do not always match reality. Women remain underrepresented in China's political and economic leadership. And as with much development in China, many reforms take much longer to reach rural communities.
I mean, it's been like that in many countries, right? Give the rights to all women, right? Because they need to join the workforce and contribute to the economy. But we don't really want you in the position of powers yet, That's kind of how it goes at first, right? In most of the history of that happening in different countries. Like, sure, you can vote, sure, you can work and make money for the country, but we don't really want you leading the country yet. That's been kind of what I've seen, I guess, what it seems like it happens most of the time.
Progress is being made, but for many, not quickly enough.
Students, we came too late. Whatever you say and criticize about us is deserved. Zhao Ziyang, 1980. I see.
For many, China's economic reforms fuel hopes for political change, especially with the rise to prominence of Hu Yaobang, Deng's old ally, now General Secretary of the party. Hu is an unusually outspoken and open-minded member of the Politburo. He advocates greater openness and challenges the privileges of the princelings, the children of senior Communist Party officials. He is hugely popular with the people. Many reformers hope he will, in time, succeed Deng as supreme leader. In 1986, popular discontent leads to student protests across China, with calls for greater openness and democracy. When Deng Xiaoping orders Hu to break up the student protests, he refuses. Hu is forced to resign and perform humiliating self-criticism in front of his colleagues. 2 years later, in the midst of a Politburo meeting, he has a heart attack and dies.
That's the problem. I mean, it's still the same today, but like all those leaders and even the one with good ideas are old as hell, right? I mean, they're always so fucking old, you know? Yeah.
The death of such a popular figure, seen as unfairly treated by an out-of-touch party, provokes a huge public reaction. Thousands of mourners gather in Beijing. They gravitate towards Tiananmen Square, where mourning turns into protest, just as it did after the death of Zhou Enlai. Exactly 70 years after the iconic protests of 1919, 100,000 students take part in demonstrations, once more calling for Mr. Democracy. On the 13th of May, hundreds begin a hunger strike, hoping to pressure the government into negotiations.
I want to say to the government, what we want is only the democracy, only the freedom of the speech, not overthrow the government. We support our government to go on the reform, economic reform and political reform.
The new party general secretary is Zhao Ziyang, another of Deng's protégés. On the 19th of May, Zhao visits the protest camp, expressing concern and sympathy. At 69, he is one of the younger members of the Politburo and tells students, "We are already old and do not matter." State
Weirdly candid. Also, again, just what I was talking about, right? Like a 69-year-old guy is, the youngest guy in all of this. I mean, with high age comes some wiseness, some people will say, but come on. All politicians being like late 60s to like 70s, 80s is just insane. These days in many countries it's getting better, right? There's a lot of younger guys, right? Not that it automatically means something good, right? I mean, our president in France is pretty young and, I wouldn't say that really changes how he acts. He kind of feels like the old guys in some ways, outside of when he tries to say, I'm actually young and I like video games or something. But it is still insane to me, yeah? Like this system of, it's always just old ass guys. I mean, not that old people don't matter or something, but, it just feels like way too much of a gap between generations.
Premier Li Peng is a far more conservative figure. He wins Deng's backing for a tough response to the protests. There will be no negotiations, no concessions. Instead, martial law is declared. And on the night of the 3rd of June, troops and tanks are sent in to clear Tiananmen Square by any means necessary. The result is a massacre. Official figures state that 218 civilians and 23 security personnel were killed, with several thousand injured. Many are skeptical of these numbers, believing the real death toll to be much higher.
I mean, isn't that literally the story so far? Like in every videos, every single time, they underreport numbers like about everything. Like they underreport anything bad, and they overinflate everything good. Constantly like that.
In the aftermath, cameras capture a remarkable moment of defiance. A lone, anonymous man on Chang'an Avenue, blocking a column of tanks. The incident is seen around the world. Tank man.
Like the balls on that guy, I mean, like, because he probably knew that he's fucked, right? Like, either the tank is going to run him across, because that's the kind of thing they might do, or like, you know, even after that he's gonna get caught, arrested, maybe in prison or like even killed. The balls on that guy.
Becomes a globally famous symbol of resistance to authoritarianism. Despite strict censorship, further reports and some footage of the bloody events emerge. The international media is quick to condemn the massacre. But the Chinese government never deviates from its official line. Speaking a few days after the event, Deng Xiaoping, now 84 years old, denounces the protests as a counter-revolutionary rebellion, fully warranting a military response. General Secretary Zhao Ziyang, who had gone to meet the protesters, is removed from office and spends 15 years under house arrest.
So he wasn't so different from Mao, this new leader, right? I mean, you know, he liked to make himself seem a lot more moderate, but, you know, I guess at times the true colors came out, you know.
Li Peng remains China's state premier for 9 more years. Later that year, Deng Xiaoping formally retires from frontline politics. And it appears he is handing power back to the party's reactionaries and conservatives. Deng's era of reforms has stalled. China seems to be going backwards.
But reform is China's second revolution, Deng Xiaoping, 85.
The Tiananmen Square massacre badly damages China's international reputation. And once again, the country finds itself isolated. Many contrast events in China with recent reforms in Taiwan, which has undergone a period of liberalization. Martial law had been lifted for the first time in 1987, paving the way for the island's first full parliamentary elections in 1991. The economy is booming, fueled by foreign investment and led by new companies such as the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, or TSMC. Today, it's the world's largest chip maker, an industry that will transform Taiwan's economy.
Of course, you saw Nvidia's name there.
In contrast, China's perceived regression leads to a significant fall in foreign investment. as the United States and European Union impose sanctions. The World Bank suspends loans. Economic forecasts for China are downgraded. China's economic stagnation will stir Deng Xiaoping into action once more. In 1992, aged 87, he embarks on a southern tour, visiting successful special economic zones where he demands bolder leadership and greater energy in the drive for economic development. He dismisses the old dogma that a socialist state must be a planned economy, with no role for a capitalist market. Single-handedly, through his immense personal influence, Deng puts reform back at the center of the agenda.
I really thought he was done. That's crazy.
Though never explicitly stated, a new contract between the Chinese Communist Party and the people is being written. Legitimacy in exchange for growth, prosperity, and national resurgence. The party upholds its side of the deal. The 1992 Party Congress declares China a socialist market economy. From now on, markets, not the state, will set the prices for goods, services, labor, and capital. Many state-owned enterprises are reformed, privatized, or allowed to fail, as large-scale private businesses take over. GDP leaps from 3.9% in 1990 to 14.2% in 1992, and remains high for a decade. According to World Bank figures, in 1990, more than 80% of the population lived in extreme poverty. Over the next 30 years, that number plummets to 0%.
0%? Is that even possible?
Some regard it as one of the greatest economic miracles in history. A vast multitude lifted out of extreme poverty in record time. But there's another side to this unprecedented economic boom. For decades, the Chinese government had subsidized housing and food. But now, price controls and parts of the social welfare system are removed. Many find themselves abandoned and struggling to get by. Now there is more unemployment, corruption, pollution, and dramatically rising inequality, especially between urban.
Wait, so I'm confused. Does the 0% make sense then, or am I misunderstanding the 0%? Or was that just like a propaganda number?
And rural populations. As a result, tens of millions of the rural poor move to booming cities, where strict residential permit requirements, known as the Hukou system, renders them second-class citizens, locked out of state benefits. In 1997, Deng Xiaoping dies, aged 92. The scale of his legacy, though contested, is hard to overstate.
I mean, he definitely did some fucked up stuff, but it still seems overall way cleaner than Mao, right? You know, if you look at the overall benefit to the country versus the bad stuff he's done, like he has a much better ratio, obviously, than Mao, to say the very least. You know.
Under Deng's leadership, China's economic potential has finally been unleashed, and living standards have soared. To his admirers, Deng is one of the greatest statesmen of the 20th century. To his detractors, he used economic reforms to entrench one-party communist rule. The man who oversaw Mao's brutal anti-rightist campaigns of the 1950s remained true to the party to the end.
Interesting guy, I mean, I knew nothing about him before the series, so interesting guy if anything. Our people are great people. As long as we unite as one, there is no difficulty that we cannot overcome. Xi Jinping, 2012. Is he coming already? Interesting.
Deng's successor as paramount leader is Jiang Zemin. Jiang, politically conservative but an economic reformer, is known for his outgoing personality and is the first Chinese leader to speak both English and Russian. Working with State Premier Li Peng, he ensures the country holds its course, balancing a growing economy with a highly centralized state. Abroad, Jiang carries on Deng's cautious approach, described as choosing to hide one's talent and bide one's time. But world leaders now choose their words carefully, as their economies become increasingly dependent on Chinese trade. In July 1997, Hong Kong is peacefully transferred from the United Kingdom to the People's Republic of China, marking the end of 156 years of colonial rule.
That's pretty crazy.
It is a hugely symbolic moment for an increasingly assertive China, definitively turning the page on its century of humiliation. Two years later, Portugal returns Macau to China. Both territories are promised limited autonomy under a one country, two systems approach. Many predict that the rise of China's middle class will lead inevitably to increased demand for political rights. This, after all, is the lesson of 19th century Europe. US President Bill Clinton even warns China that its record on human rights puts it on the wrong side of history.
Yeah, I mean, you're one to talk.
Around the world, there is a confident assumption that prosperity will make China more like the West. In defiance of such expectations, the 21st century sees China continue to grow in economic power and international stature, while at home, the Communist Party continues to rule virtually unopposed. In 2001, China joins the World Trade Organization. Chinese goods become cheaper and more competitive than ever. Within a few years, China is the world's largest exporter. More and more foreign companies offshore their manufacturing to China to take advantage of cheap labor. The Chinese economy grows at rates other nations can only dream of. 10, 12, then 14%. It is, the World Bank declares, the fastest sustained expansion by a major economy in history.
It is kind of insane. I mean, I've heard many times in recent time, people saying that, yeah, China's growth in many ways has been absolutely insane, but I didn't ever really know the details. This is a good showcase of that, yeah, especially now that we know the whole history of the century of humiliation to this half century of miracles or something. It is pretty insane. Yeah, really, like the speed of modernization and all that is kind of cooked.
The only thing keeping pace is the country's carbon emissions and air pollutants. In 2008, China hosts its first Olympic Games.
I was waiting for them to get to that because I always remember that one South Park episode where Cartman is basically terrified of the Chinese after watching the opening ceremony of the 2008 Olympic Games, where, you know, there's like so many Chinese doing crazy performances, right? And so he starts to believe that the Chinese will take over America. It's a great episode.
It is the perfect stage to showcase a new China to the world. Prosperous, confident, and ambitious. The opening ceremony is an awe-inspiring spectacle that celebrates thousands of years of Chinese history. In 2009, China overtakes Japan to become the world's second largest economy, behind only the USA.
I'm actually surprised Japan was number 2 when it's so small.
Communist Party rule is not entirely uncontested. Far from Beijing, in Tibet and Xinjiang, there are protests over the perceived injustices of its rule. They are met with force and mass detention. The entire country, meanwhile, is subject to increasingly sophisticated surveillance and strict censorship. The Great Firewall helps to keep Chinese citizens safe from harmful foreign ideas, while the internet is continuously patrolled for any sign of dissent.
It is really interesting because, again, a lot of this was talking about how, like, they managed to ultra-modernize, ultra-advance at crazy speed in economy and many other subjects, right? And yet, the government system and all that kind of, rather than like progress in a more free way, it actually kind of almost regressed, you know, by adopting new technology to like go even further than before, you know, like the Great Firewall and the massive amount of surveillance. It's kind of...
The Communist Party guarantee of stability, security, and prosperity comes at a price. The freedoms that are taken for granted in many other parts of the world. In 2012, after 10 years of leadership, the cautious, technocratic Hu Jintao passes the baton to a new leader, Xi Jinping. A century on from the abdication of the last Qing emperor, China is a country that has been utterly transformed. The road has been long, bloody, and turbulent. But there is no doubt that the Middle Kingdom has resumed its natural place at the heart of global affairs.
an incredible series.
Would you like to see new episodes from Epic History weeks before they're out on YouTube? How about new episodes of our complete history of World War II? That's right, after years of requests, we've finally begun our epic account of World War II, exploring the origins and course of history's most devastating conflict.
I've reacted to episode 1 already.
Early episodes investigate the causes of war, charting the rise of fascism and militarism within the future Axis powers. Then, just like our popular World War I series, we'll follow the conflict year by year, covering every front, every campaign, and every major battle. And to be first to see every new episode, prestige streaming service Nebula
Alright, I'll pause here, but obviously, thank you to the sponsors as always. I think they're getting a lot of great sponsors these days and probably a good amount of money because the speed at which the channel has increased the release of stuff. I mean, I feel like for a while they would release like one video every month or two, but now it's like 2-3 high quality video per month or something. It's kind of crazy, which is awesome because they're like, for me, the best history channel on YouTube. So with this level of quality, all the series they're doing recently, amazing stuff. But yeah, I was kind of thinking this was it, and yeah, this is it. It is the final episode of The Rise of China, because I guess Xi Jinping is still in power, and I guess they would maybe make another episode once, you know, his part of the story has finished, and at this rate, he might be there for another 20 years. But yeah, that was kind of incredible. I think, you know, again, I always say that Napoleon is the best series they've ever done, and it still is. You know, it's a 30 to 40 video series with an incredible amount of in-depth detail. But, you know, a series like this, right? Like 5 videos going this in-depth on the rise of China from like the last 100 years. I mean, I've learned so much, you know, and yeah, I feel like I understand things a lot better, right? I can't lie that before I didn't really know much about China outside of like maybe, you know, the Legend of the Three Kingdoms, right? So like especially recent history like this, I really didn't know much, and now I know more, and I feel less stupid about it, you know. So yeah, an amazing series.